Okay, so you sent us a bunch of sources, all talking about this new U.S. defense thing called Golden Dome.
That's right. And today, just using the material you shared, we're going to try and, unpack what this Golden Dome actually is, who's driving it, and maybe most importantly, the kind of reactions it's already stirring up internationally.
Yeah, and looking through these sources, it's clear this isn't small potatoes. We're talking, what, $175 billion? Dollars?
Uh-huh.
And it's already, based on this info, drawing some really sharp criticism. Warnings about, like, a new arms race.
Exactly. So let's dive in. According to these sources, what is this Golden Dome system really?
Well, the basics seem to be U.S. plan announced under President Donald Trump.
Right. And the stated aim is protection. Protecting the U.S., protecting allies.
Oh. The sources describe this network of satellites. Hundreds of them, apparently.
Hundreds, yeah, in orbit. And they're equipped with interceptors, missile interceptors.
So weapons in space, basically, designed to track and destroy incoming missiles.
That's the idea. And the potential sources of those missiles mentioned are countries like, North Korea, China, Iran, Russia.
Okay. And the U.S. claim, per these sources, is this system is faster, maybe better, than what we have now on the ground or at sea.
That's the argument presented, yeah. Better, faster protection.
What strikes me reading this is how much of a strategic shift it seems to be.
Absolutely. That comes through strongly in the sources. It looks like a move towards openly building offensive space weapons systems.
Which feels different from how things might have been done before.
Yeah, perhaps less behind closed doors. And it's not just a concept, it's tied to a proposal for a whole new agency, a space defense agency, to run it.
And this is all happening right after the U.S. Space Force itself was sounding the alarm.
Exactly. The sources mention these prior warnings from Space Force about growing threats in space, specifically naming Russia and China.
So the context is already pretty tense up there.
It seems so. That concern about space threats was laid down, and then Golden Dome sort of emerges as this very concrete and very, very expensive answer.
$175 billion expensive.
Right.
Okay, now, this is where it gets really interesting, based on the sources you sent, the reactions from other countries. And just to be clear, we're reporting what the sources say here.
Correct, impartially.
Let's start with North Korea. What did the sources capture about their take?
Well, their reaction, as reported in these materials, was extremely negative. They apparently called it a very dangerous, threatening initiative.
That's wrong words.
Very. It escalated to phrases like a scenario of nuclear war in outer space. The specific language cited was arrogant and reckless.
Wow. So they see it as a direct threat, something that upsets the balance.
That's clearly the view presented in the sources, yes. Destabilizing makes conflict more likely. That's the reported position.
Okay. What about China? Did the sources detail their reaction?
Yes. China also expressed strong concerns. They apparently urged the U.S. to cancel the whole thing.
And their reasoning?
The sources suggest China fears the U.S. is trying to use this to get a dominant position in space, to basically weaken other countries' defenses.
Undermining deterrence.
That seems to be the worry, yeah. And analysts quoted in the sources specifically pointed to this possibly ramping up the militarization of space. A big increase.
So, the common thread, there seemed to be this fear of upsetting the strategic equilibrium, however shaky it is.
That definitely comes across.
Any word on Russia in these particular sources?
Interestingly, no. According to the materials you provided, there hadn't been a public Russian response logged at the time they were published.
Okay. Beyond specific countries, what about, like, the wider picture? Experts, other governments mention.
Well, that ties right back to the strategic shift we were talking about. Even though the U.S. frames Golden Dome as defensive,
Right.
a major concern flagged by experts and other governments in these sources is that it could spark a new arms race, specifically in space.
Even if the stated goal is defense.
Yeah, the critics quoted seem to argue that just putting weapons in orbit, regardless of the stated purpose, is inherently escalatory. It changes the game.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together from the sources. We've got this huge, costly U.S. plan, Golden Dome.
Right, satellites shooting down missiles.
But it's met with pretty serious alarm from North Korea and China, who see it as a threat.
And broader warnings from experts about provoking an arms race, militarizing space further.
It really highlights this tension, doesn't it, between national security goals and, well, international stability, especially when it comes to space.
It absolutely does. It frames space as this increasingly contested strategic domain.
So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. Looking at the debate around Golden Dome, just based on these sources, What does it tell us about the future? Where military competition might be heading, and just how fragile the role of space is in keeping things, stable?